Welcome to Real Estate for All. We're so excited that you're here. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope we're going to learn a lot about real estate development basics and a little bit more about community investment. Okay, let's get started. All right, so just as a reminder, we are recording this session. Real Estate for All has been put together by Co-Everything, T Lead Development, and the Erie, Ellington, and Brinsley Partnership. We've got Travis Lee and Milton Bramble from T Lead Development, and I'm Miriam G, and my partner Declan Keefe. We are Co-Everything. And then we also have Marilyn Foreman, who is supporting us as part of the president of Erie, Ellington, and Brinsley Partnership Neighborhood Association. So special thanks to Marilyn, Denisha McDonald, Marty Fuller, Jackie Cooper, Daniel, Lizette, Sharon, and Dariella for all of your support in community advisors to bring together this community workshop. All right, so let's do a little bit of framing, shall we? Surprise, the housing system is broken. If you've showed up here, you may or may not be invested in real estate already. And you might be thinking, what are we up against? It's tough being in the city of Boston. We have stolen indigenous land and the displacement of Native Americans as the basis for this place that we are in, redlining and racist policies against Black and POC communities. We have also the fact that buildings account for around 40% of carbon emissions and wealth and environmental inequality. And all of this can cause and contribute to housing instability with insufficient government assistance programs. So it might paint a hopeless picture, but in fact, you are sitting here with a team of optimists who do believe that there is still hope. For us, we wanted to create this workshop called Real Estate for All because we think that sharing knowledge and kind of demystifying real estate development and the systems that we're all involved in and creating more ownership opportunities for neighbors is a chance to flip the system on its head and offer a more cooperative and collaborative approach to being a part of this. So today, let's learn the basics in a fun and engaging way. We hope that you'll come away with being able to identify a few key players and concepts in real estate development, and also find out ways that you can participate and learn about alternative ways to invest in your community for less than $2,000. All right, so our topics to introduce here are real estate development basics, public process and participation, financial models and pro forma, affordable housing, and I put that in quotes, affordable housing, and alternative community investment. And throughout the course of this workshop, we're going to have some explainer videos that'll come out from the team that we introduced in the beginning. So we're going to just share a quick little video. And let me just stop sharing for 1 second to give you a teaser about the content that you'll be expecting in your email inbox from May 22nd to 29th. Hi everyone, welcome to Real Estate for All. I'm Miriam G.
My name is Travis Lee.
My name is Denisha McDonald.
My name is Jacqueline Cooper. I am Marilyn Foreman.
I'm Declan Keefe.
If you live in the city, you ride around, walk around vacant lots or vacant buildings, and you see them for a while, they start to catch your imagination.
Developers are usually not architects. They're usually not general contractors. They're usually not attorneys. They're usually somebody who is good at managing a process.
Developer is like the captain of that ship.
The ship has sailed, the captain took us all the way there to our destination.
This gives community members an opportunity to have a say and a stake in their community.
So that everyone is able to own a piece of the rock.
High five if that was your hand.
Great. So thank you everybody for being a part of our little promo. I hope you feel like you can connect with these neighborhood superstars when you see them around town. let's get back to our presentation. Okay, so if it seems like anything's a little bit too high level in this next, hour and a half that we're about to spend together, never fear, we will be taking questions throughout the entire week, and then we will end on May 29th with a live Q&A where we'll do a deeper dive, and hopefully we'll be able to give you some more information. So today is just a high-level overview of all the things that you can expect to receive. You can watch these videos whenever you want and dive deeper into the topics and resources that we will be sharing. So again, the workshop format is, number 1, attend a kickoff meeting. And if you have folks that you think will be interested in this content and didn't get a chance to attend today, there's also a second kickoff where we'll be doing the same presentation on Saturday at 2 p.m. And then step number 2, which you've also done because you showed up here and you went through the crazy Eventbrite process, is signing up for email and text follow-up. So you'll be looking for things in step 3, which will be self-paced content, videos, and resources throughout the week from May 22nd to 29th. And then step 4 is when you get a chance, send in questions via email or text, depending on which format you chose in the Eventbrite registration. And of course, then attend the Zoom Q&A closeout on Saturday, May 29th at 2 p.m. And at that point in time, we're hoping folks will get to meet some of their other neighbors who are interested in real estate development basics, and you can connect and just get to know each other. All right. Moving on, let's just do a little bit of some broad overview. So real estate development basics. There are all these classes out there talking about real estate development, fix and flip, or Urban Land Institute, and some of those can be a little dry and boring. So we're going to try and keep it fun and accessible for y'all. So we're going to talk about how to start a real estate development project and who are the key players involved. And what I'm going to have us do here is I'm going to go through a little bit of an interactive story. And I may ask some of our community advisors to participate in this story. So just a second here. All right. Can everybody see these little cartoons here? Can I get some thumbs up if people can see my cartoons? Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Allie. Thanks, Eric. Okay, cool. I got enough thumbs up that I feel like we're all on the same page. All right, so I'm going to ask Declan if you could do me a favor and kind of hunt through the maze of Zoom and get some of our community advisors and offer them to unmute themselves. And we're going to start with this little story. And this is how to start a real estate development project. So in our cartoon here, we've got a web of all of these different people, all of these different parties that are involved. And the first person in this story that we're going to talk about is named Jacqueline. And Jackie Cooper, this person is inspired by you. Jackie is our real estate developer, okay? And Jackie's got an idea. She's been walking around the neighborhood and some of these vacant parcels have caught her imagination, like she says. And so Jackie finds out that there's a piece of land for sale. And this landowner is Declan. And so the first step here is that Jackie's going to get in touch with this landowner and Declan and say, hey, I'm interested in buying your piece of land. I've got some ideas. I would really love to see something happening here. I walk by this place every day in the neighborhood and I want to know if your land is for sale. And so Declan responds to Jackie and says, oh yeah, this land is a $2 sign. So what do you think about that offer? And Jackie says, okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. What's Jackie going to do next? Because Jackie is a good developer and has lived in the community her whole life, she's going to talk to other neighbors in Dorchester. And she's going to ask neighbors in the community, what is it that we think we want to build here? And so Jackie is going to talk to Marilyn. And Marilyn, you're going to be our community member. You want to unmute yourself and give us a description of what you want to see here on this lot, on this blank vacant parcel that Declan's going to sell to Jackie.
Oh, like right now?
Yeah, just make something up.
Oh, okay. I'd love to see a community cafe.
Okay, great. So Marilyn goes back to Jackie and says, Jackie, you think we can incorporate a community cafe into this project? And Jackie, what do you say? Are you into this idea? You can unmute yourself.
Knowing Marilyn, she always wanted a community cafe because I've known Marilyn for a long time. So I am going to develop, I want to see how much land I have and what's going to be the efficient use of the project. But I am going to include a community cafe because it'll be a gathering place for the neighborhood, before the neighborhood in using this development. So it's a good thing.
Great. Thanks, Jackie. What a great idea, Marilyn. I'm glad y'all have known each other for so long. That community cafe was coming down the line. All right. So next then, Jackie's like, okay, I got this idea for a community cafe and I got to figure out how much this thing is going to cost before I get all of my money and financing and decide how much I'm going to pay. Am I going to pay Declan for these $2 signs for this piece of land? Isn't that great? Dollar signs are like Yelp. It's like land, $1 sign to $5 signs. So Jackie gets in touch with Milton, her contractor, and says, hey, can you run this by your architect, Miriam? Let's say that Milton and Miriam are on a design build team, okay? So I'll be the architect and Milton, you can be the contractor. And Jackie's coming to us with this idea and says, hey, is this possible? Is this even zoned for this? Can we have a community cafe? Can you create a concept and do a little sketch of what's going to fit here? And then maybe Milton can give us some pricing. So Milton, I don't know if you're on the line or if you're dropped off. You want to give Jackie a price? Is it going to be $1 signs, $2 signs, $3 signs, $4 or $5 signs for this community cafe build out?
Yeah, $3 signs.
$3 signs. Okay, so Jackie, you feeling good? You like my design here? I just drew it on this iPad. Are you feeling this cafe design? It's going to be a 2-story cafe, and it's going to have a beautiful outdoor plaza and a place where there's going to be a great water park in the front. Are you into it? Jackie? Oh, Jackie.
Muted and it wasn't letting me unmute after I heard $3 signs, Milton. You couldn't do better than that. Okay, but once Miriam made it multi-story, has a plaza, we can outdoor cafe in the summer. I'm good with that. That sounds nice.
Okay, you're into it.
I'm in.
She's into it. $2 signs for the land, $3 signs for the cafe build out. Okay, it sounds like we know what we want to spend the money on, Jackie. I think it's time we go get some money. So the next step is for Jackie to talk to the bank. And is David around here? David's the bank. Look at David's this beautiful piggy bank. This is the first bank of David, everybody. And so Jackie's going to ask the bank to appraise this design. We've got this design that we've sketched up. We've got a $3 sign price from Milton, our contractor. And what do you think about the value that's going to be created? Are we going to make good money? Are we going to get good rents on this cafe in the future? And will the Bank of David lend Jackie some money to build this project? David, are you there? The first
Yeah,
one?
I'm here. So
Are you
Jackie,
gonna lend her the money?
David.
Jackie, yes. do I trust you to pay me back my money with that investment? How much do you need?
How many dollar signs
I
do you
need $5 signs, 2 to acquire the land, and 3 to build the building.
Okay. So what's my profit in this?
$1 sign.
Okay. All right. Because I know you've got some good credit, I'll give you that.
Thank you, David.
Phew, got the money from the bank.
This is the easiest development ever.
See, I'm glad we're having fun. I'm glad we're having fun with this community cafe. Thanks to the First Bank of David. That
Yeah.
was wonderful. That's the easiest bank application you ever gone through for a loan. All right. We got some other folks in the audience tonight who also want to invest. Equity investors and maybe community investors. So Jackie's like, all right, I got my $5 signs loan, but I'm still gonna have to pay back the bank. There's gonna be some other costs involved, and I know some other people who can help us out. So we're gonna ask, I don't know if Lizette is on the call tonight. I think she couldn't make it because there was a VA board meeting, but I think Marty is in the audience. Marty, are you here? Oh, maybe not. Okay. We'll fill in for Marty. I'll be Marty then. All right. Jackie, I really do this project. I do want to invest some money. I don't have a ton of money to invest, but I'll invest $1 sign if you give me half a dollar sign later. Does that sound pretty good? I'll be at risk with you. I'll be in it with you. I'll put in my own dollar sign. I know I might lose that dollar sign, but considering it'll be a really high return, and there's no guarantee that I'll get that money back, I'm going to invest with you. Will you bring me on to your team as an investor?
I will bring you on as an investor. I have a few more people like yourself that's interested, and I think that would be a great partnership.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So now that we've got this development team lined up, there's one final approval that we all have to go through, and that's the zoning board. Da-da. So we're going to talk to Denisha, who is the president of the zoning board. And Denisha may or may not be driving her kids to swim lessons right now or back from swim lessons right now. But Jackie, do you want to give your presentation to the zoning board about this great project and ask them to approve the variances? Because in fact, maybe this area did not have a conditional use for a community cafe. And then we'll see if Denisha will give you the okay.
Hi, zoning board members. We have a wonderful project in the community that we would like to develop. We would like to develop a community cafe. Here's the beautiful drawings of what the cafe looks like. It's 2 levels with a plaza that will be good for community gatherings, eating outdoors, and just enjoying the neighborhood with a little play area for the children. It's going to be a great project. All of the neighbors love it. They got together with me. I was able to purchase the land. I was able to get the money and investment so that I can complete the project in 2 years.
Oh my gosh. What do you say, Denisha?
What do you say, zoning board?
It looks like this area is actually zoned residential and you're trying to build a community cafe. Is there housing included in this proposal?
Sure.
You're gonna have to go through a little bit of a community process because it's this, again, it's residential. You're trying to put in more of a mixed use. So we're gonna need you to go back and resubmit your drawings and then go back to the community and make sure they all say yes to you bringing in this community cafe in their residential area. If they say okay, then we can move forward.
Okay, thank you for your opinion. I will go back and talk to the neighbors and see if they're interested in this nice community cafe in their neighborhood where they can get all the coffee and tea that they would like all day long without having to go anywhere else. So I will check with them.
All right, so then I guess that brings us back to Marilyn. So Marilyn, what do you think? I've drawn up this new vision that Jackie has put together of a mixed use housing project that has this cafe in the bottom. It's 2 floors of the bottom of this building and 2 floors on top of housing. Are you into this vision, Marilyn, as the president of Erie Ellington? Tell us. What do you think?
Sure, I think it's a great idea. I guess it would make it sustainable, so at least it can come to fruition. So yeah, I think that would be a great idea to incorporate the housing. Yeah, because after all, we did want the cafe. So yes.
Wonderful. Will you come with us to the zoning board again when we do our presentation so that we can get approved
Most
by
certainly
Denisha?
will, of course.
All right, Jackie, petition Denisha one more time. You know, here, months and months have gone past. Months and months have gone past, and we're back at the zoning board again.
I hope everybody now sees why this is 2 years, right? I'm back at the zoning board with my friend Marilyn. And Denisha, thank you for your recommendations on our last visit to the zoning board. And I have returned with one of the community members who would like to talk about the need for this cafe and the desire for the community to have that. And we have redone our drawings. We now have 8 units of housing over 2 floors over the cafe. So even there'll always be people, eyes on the street and people there because we have housing above the cafe.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I see, thank you. You went back, you got the variances, understood those are approved, and we have this community member in support. Do we have anyone here who is in opposition to this development project right now?
Zero opposition so that we can move on to the next exercise.
Yeah, there we go. You are approved.
Thank you everyone for going through that little exercise with us. I hope you thought that was fun. That was just an example of how one could start a real estate development project and the importance of being connected to community, which brings us to our next topic to introduce, public process and participation. So we're going to go over the Zoning Board of Appeals and hearings, and then Boston's RFP process and different ways that we as community members can get involved. The city of Boston has some pretty boring websites, but I tried to make some of this information a little more fun. Who is involved with permitting and zoning? The Inspectional Services Department reviews applications, issues permits, inspects work, and enforces code. They're involved. There's also the BPDA, Boston Planning and Development Agency, which I'm sure we've all heard of. They review Article 80 small projects and analyze any zoning code amendments that may come up. And then the Zoning Board of Appeal, AKA Denisha. Just kidding, Denisha is not really the Zoning Board of Appeal. And their job is to approve or deny zoning and building code appeals. So in this instance, in our example, we're going to focus on the ZBA. Jackie was petitioning to put in a use that wasn't allowed in the zone for residential to bring in the community cafe that was requested by community members. So she would have had to go through a hearing process, which can be pretty time intensive and allows an opportunity for community members to share their voice. First of all, let's take a little step back and talk about what is zoning code. Very broadly, zoning code is a regulation on what types of building can be built in different zones throughout the city. And they may give you requirements like how tall it is, how wide, how many apartments, how many stories is the building, how much parking is required, depending on what you're going to put in there, how much green space or open space, etc. And pretty rarely, but sometimes you may come across a project that you can design and put in through the permitting process that's called as of right. And that may mean that everything complies with building and zoning code and you don't have to get any relief or go to a hearing. However, in the instance that you do need to go through the hearing process, you can see in this kind of little yellow circle, I've highlighted through the process of submitting all of your paperwork, you will arrive at this point called an abutters meeting or the community process that leads you to the Zoning Board of Appeal. And so whenever you need zoning relief, neighbors can get involved. ZBA hearings are open to the public. We'll be giving a little bit more information in this in our follow-up email course. It's also, you might get flyered if you're a direct abutter, you'll receive an actual postcard on your doorstep that says, hey, we're gonna have this ZBA hearing, there's this new development proposal that's coming through the pipeline, and we wanna know what you think about it. Neighborhood associations, for example, like Maryland is part of Erie, Ellington, and Brinsley Partnership Neighborhood Association. The neighborhood associations will be invited, and then people can share their opinions and ask questions about the development. And then ultimately, after the community process happens and questions are asked, and the design team and the development team answers questions from the community, the ZBA ultimately is the one that will decide whether or not the relief will be granted. So coming with community support is a good way to go. So we can get involved as neighbors, even though you may not get flyered for one of the projects happening in your neighborhood because you're not within the exact radius. All of those meetings are open to the public and you can participate. All right, another dry yet important process called requests for proposals, or RFPs. The Department of Neighborhood Development, or the city's D&D department, is responsible for many things, and one of those things includes managing the city's real estate. The city sells property to developers, and these developers are answering a request for proposal in any instance, trying to make the community better. Often it's around affordable housing, and then they need to meet the requirements of this proposal in order to have a chance to buy or acquire a piece of property or land. The land or parcels and buildings can be owned by the City of Boston, BPDA, or D&D. Different entities throughout the city may be trying to create a new project by offering this process. So essentially, there's going to be a whole list of qualifications. And when selecting a buyer of the land, the city is looking for the price that you're offering for the land, proof of financing. So the entire exercise that Jackie did, where she had to go and ask David for money, and she had to ask Marty and Lizette and other investors to come in with her. You need to have your financing in order. And then you also need to have a proven track record or experience doing these types of development. So if Jackie had come before the city and wasn't buying the land from Declan, but it was instead responding to a request for proposal from the city, she would have had to show that she's done mixed use with Community Cafe in the past. By law, the city can only choose a buyer who meets all of the RFP requirements. You can't just like open bid on property like it's Zillow with the city. That's not how it works. They're always considering, will the current real estate market support the development? And does the local community want the property to be developed? Perhaps they want it to be reserved as open space, or for community gardening, or for view corridor. So here's where you come in. When the city gets involved and is ready to sell something, they'll come to community members and neighborhood associations and start to hold public process and meetings online. And local residents can share their opinions on how to shape this request for proposal. So they may just say, hey, here's these 3 lots in a neighborhood. They're all adjacent to each other in Dorchester, and they're going to come to Maryland or another civic association and say, let's rally everybody together and brainstorm about what could go here. And after that, they'll collect all these ideas, and then that becomes the request for proposals after the city has vetted it. Then developers will eventually present their ideas back to the community for feedback if you're responding. Ultimately, it will be the city who selects the developer, but you can be part of that community process. We'll hear more on that from Marilyn in videos next week. So moving on to financial models. You may have heard the term a pro forma, so we'll talk about that. What is a pro forma? And we'll talk about how to fund real estate development projects, and then just the balancing act that is finances and the challenges and opportunities that come with real estate development in the city. So first, what is a pro forma? A pro forma is basically a set of calculations that developers use to analyze the financial returns of any proposed real estate development project. So you think about, you have an idea, you need to run it through your pro forma to see if it's essentially a go or a no-go. So this is like the calculations you would do to test whether or not to move forward with the project. Let's say that Jackie did her pro forma analysis and Declan was selling the land for $4 signs. And she figured out that actually if the land was being sold for $4 signs, there's no that she could only put affordable eight units in a community cafe. It would have had to be a whole bunch of units, maybe 20 or 30 units. And she knew that community members would not be excited about that number of units on this small lot. So essentially, it's a way that you can analyze whether or not you should move forward on a project. All of these projections are still just ideas. To break it down simply and not to get into like real estate jargony terms, I wanted to do a little brainstorm using the chat. So what we're going to think about here is, where does the money go in development? Before you build your building, and then after you've built your building and you need to maintain your building and operate it, can you type into the chat any number of things that you can think of? What are you going to spend the money on? And where is the money going to come from? So anything that you can think of, go ahead and take a minute to brainstorm anything into the chat, and then I'm going to paste them into this. Gary writes purchase of the land. Great, Gary. I'm going to put that here in our list. And then we've got consultants and surveys. Okay, that's great. Thanks, Michelle. Consultants and surveys. Architect. Permits. Thank you, Paul. Oh, Marty's joining us. Oh, building materials, definitely. Permits for sure. Taxes. Oh, labor. That's great. Labor to build the project. Taxes. Taxes might be something that is still ongoing. Maybe you're going to be paying for that after. I put a little bit of emojis in case you get stuck on some ideas. What are the costs of maintaining this building once the building is built? I've got a hammer and a wrench and a snowflake and a leaf. Utilities. Okay, great. Utilities. Thanks, Allie. Repairs. Thank you, Michael. What else have we got? I'm going to go ahead and put this one. This one is like my favorite, which is snow removal. Capital expenditures. Yikes. Okay, we'll get it. I'll throw it in there. I was trying to do like regular people words. Exterior maintenance. Thanks, Michelle. Machines. Okay, yeah, repairing machines. Replacing things. Security. Great. Okay. Now, what about after the project is built? Let's talk about, this is Jackie's 8-unit project with 2 levels of community cafe and an outdoor plaza. How is Jackie's project going to bring money in after it's built? Where are we going to get the money to pay our mortgage every month? Rent. Okay, great. So we'll put this cafe rent from the commercial tenant. Community cafe, regular people words. Yep, that's what I'm about, Daryl. And we'll get some rent over here from our 8 units. And I don't know, maybe we're going to make some money off of events. Let's say that we're going to get some money where people host events and they can pay some fees to rent our outdoor plaza. Does that sound good? Okay, so essentially this was like a regular people's version of deciding some of the inputs that would go into your pro forma analysis. So we would list out all of these things, decide how much money goes towards each of them and when they need to be paid for and when the money's going to come in. And then that will give us a bit of an analysis to decide how much money we need to get to make this project. So that brings us to our next topic, tying it back together, how to fund a real estate development project. So our developer, Jackie, needs money to pay for the land, property acquisition, site control, design, the architects, the construction, which is materials and labor, fees for attorneys and permits to make this project go. And sources for the funding may include debt from a bank. For example, the First Bank of David was willing to loan $5 signs to this project in order to get $2 signs back later over time. Equity from private investors, and that could be anyone from me and Marty and Lizette and other people in the community who have a little bit of money to invest, or larger investors who have a big lump of cash to invest. The developer herself can put in equity, so Jackie herself could put in cash to the project to fund it and make it go. Maybe because it's a community cafe, she's going to partner with a nonprofit and they're going to get some grants and donations to do cash for their fit out. There could be public funds involved. Maybe if we won the RFP from the city, they're going to give us a really low interest loan so that we can help pay for the project. And then maybe if it ends up being an affordable housing or income restricted housing project, we might be able to get some tax credits if we partner with, let's say we're going to partner with Common Square or Viet Aid or another nonprofit that has experience doing tax credits, low-income housing tax credit projects. It's a little bit complicated, so I'm not going to get into it, but all you need to know at this point in time is tax credits are coming from government taxes in the form of subsidies that eventually help people pay for buildings so that they can collect less rents in the future for income restricted housing units. Okay, so all that is to say, development is a total balancing act. You are juggling multiple positions, different stakeholders, things that community members want, things that the development project can or cannot afford. Development can be good and bad, and hopefully if it's community driven, we think it's good. And we know that it changes the landscape, it changes traffic patterns, ecosystems, habitats. It also can create more jobs and curb appeal. It is a vehicle for more local home ownership or local ownership in general that can bring neighbors together. We always ask the question, affordable to who is this project for? Is it for long-term residents, renters, homeowners? We're balancing growth versus maintaining the character of a neighborhood. And then we're also, fingers crossed, trying to meet the desires of our neighbors. Marilyn and other community members in our example wanted this community cafe, and we're also meeting the city's request for zoning for housing because that's what the area was zoned for. All along the way, we may have the opportunity to improve infrastructure, create healthier buildings, and have positive environmental, social, and economic impacts. So more to come on development in your future videos. We've got this pro forma. We did our brainstorm of what goes into it. We've balanced all of the things that we want to put into our development project. And now it's time to determine if this is a go or a no-go project. It's really important that we use an accurate pro forma estimate in the beginning to come up with the net operating income, NOI. So I'm using a non-regular person words. This is like actual jargon, but that's okay. We could do a little bit of it. Because what we're trying to find out here, is there any cash flow that could result in a good return on investment for investors? So we've got our income, what makes money. We said commercial rents, lease rents, maybe we're going to make some money on events that we're holding there, minus our operating expenses, which is what costs money to run the building. So we talked about capital expenditures, we talked about repairs, snow removal, taxes, insurance. And so we take the income and we minus those expenses for the year, and then we'll get our net operating income. And then we need to subtract, jargon word, debt service, which is essentially the loan that we paid to the bank plus the interest that the First Bank of David wants. And then any interest to investors. So anything that is going to go out to, say, Marty and Lizette and maybe Jackie herself, who invested in cash equity investments. So then whatever's left over is called the net income. And then that cash could be distributed to investors or owners of the development. And it could also be used to be saved for a reserve, maybe for repairs or other funds down the line. What does that look like? What could that look like? I just wanted to give an example of what it could look like for a project in Boston so that we can feel the gravity of these numbers a little bit beyond $1 or $2 signs. So this is an example pro forma. This is make believe. Let's say this is 30 compact apartments in Boston. It's going to be income restricted to 9% area median income, and there's going to be some parking, and it's not going to be funded by any tax credits. So we've got to come up with the money ourselves here. So we can pretend this is Jackie's project. This is a different project Jackie's working on because I didn't know what she was going to say. The land acquisition cost could be $1.2 million in Boston. So we're buying this land off of the market. The construction costs for these units will be around $6 million. So it's important to note here, the majority of the project costs will actually be construction. We're looking at land at 1.2 million, construction at around 6, professional fees, that's like architects, engineers, lawyers, permitting fees, etc. That's 1.4 million. So the total development is $8.5 million for these 30 apartments. Because we got the land on the market and we are paying living wages to our contractor and we are going to use healthy materials and build a healthy building, this is going to be 6 of that $8.5 million as the project cost goes towards construction. So 70% of the project costs are coming from construction. The next portion, where are we going to get funding for this project? So let's say we get a big investor to put in $1.3 million. And then we might go out and have community investors and the developer herself maybe investing $300,000. So you can see the big investors putting in 4 times the amount of the developer. That's going to make up a portion. And then the biggest chunk, 80% of the chunk, is going to come from the bank. So that loan of $7 million will get our total funding sources up to $8.5 million. So you can see 80% of the funding for this project is coming in the form of a loan for a bank, and that's pretty normal. The bank will require you to have a profitable pro forma that you're showing in order to lend you money. The bank will not lend you money if you show them a project that won't make money in the end, because in the end, it's the developer who's taking the risk and the development team and the investors. So if the project doesn't lease up or you don't find anyone to, your community cafe goes out of business and you can't find a new tenant to move in, all of that risk and everything comes back to the developer, and the bank is going to come knocking on Jackie's door saying, I need you to pay that mortgage, Jackie, even if you didn't find any tenants. I don't care. I want that money. So David will be knocking on your door. So again, the projected annual revenue. So this is still, we're looking at a below market rate rentals in Boston, $620,000. And that might sound like a lot per year for 30 apartments, okay? But once you subtract the annual expenses, all the things that you have to spend money on to keep this building running, that's $220,000. So you're left with $400,000 per year. You know, and it sounds like a lot over the whole year, but divided by 12 months and 30 apartments, it's maybe a little bit makes more sense. But then once you put in your payments that you have to make to the bank because you took out a $7 million loan, you have $270,000. That means that 35% of all of the money you make in a year will go towards just paying for the expenses to operate the building. And then 43% of the money you make in a year will go towards paying off your bank loan. So what's left in the end, $130,000 over the course of 12 months, so about $10,000-ish, $11,000-ish per month. That's not much left in profits, but what's that is left over for is to also pay out the investors. So that will go back to, excuse me, it's not pay out the investors, it's to pay a return on investment to the investors. So the big investor who put in 1.2 million and the community investors and Jackie, the developer herself, who put in 300,000 are going to be making back some of that money in profits, and then some of it may go in a reserve. So that's just to say that a lot of it goes towards paying back your construction loan and operating the building every year. So even though you may be paying your rent money every month and think that it goes all to your landlord, it may not if the whole building's not paid off. Okay, So this moves us on to affordable housing. So what we're going to talk about here is how developers create income restricted housing and common ways that affordable housing is paid for. So we often hear the phrase affordable housing, and then raise your hand if you've ever asked yourself, affordable to who? Can I afford this housing? That's pretty much everyone. We live in Boston. I think we've all heard of that phrase and thought, affordable to who? Thank you, Julia D, for raising your hand. And Donna and everybody. Okay. This is not to say that we're coming up with all of the answers here. I talked about all of the things that we're up against in the beginning as the framing for this, but we just did want to acknowledge that when people say affordable housing, maybe it's not really the best term to use for that term, but that's what people call it in the industry, okay? So what we might really be talking about here is two different ways that we can help people have less expensive housing, okay? And what we're talking about here is income restricted housing. So when a developer works on income restricted housing, what that means is that the units in that project have been paid for or subsidized, normally with tax credits or other government assistance programs or other funds to help pay for the construction of that building upfront, that then gets paid out over time in a form of like tax syndication exchange. Not super important, but just know that what it means is that folks who make at or below a certain income level based on the number of people in your household. So you take your salary and the number of people in your household, you can type it into Metro List on Boston, and it will tell you, hey, you would qualify for renting in any of these units, or you would qualify to purchase any of these units that have been put in the city's pool of income restricted housing units. It can either be for rent or for home ownership, and often, almost always, it's involving a lottery. So even though you may qualify, you may still have to enter a lottery to have a chance to have one of those places to rent or to have a chance to purchase one of those homes. And Denisha will give a great video talk on that later in the follow-up next week. There's also voucher programs, and this is a different way that the government supports and provides assistance for housing. So Boston Housing Authority voucher programs are also based on income limits, and they may be based on other characteristics such as, are you a veteran? Are you a senior? Are you living with disabilities? Do you have priority 1 status? And in this instance, instead of it necessarily being tied to the building, renters who qualify will pay 30% of their income, and then the Boston Housing Authority will pay the remainder of the rent to the landlord. So this could mean if you have qualified for a voucher and you've gotten on the wait list and like miraculously you've gotten on this list, you could rent in a private property. It's illegal to turn folks away, but we know folks do it. But you could rent on the market in any place and pay your 30%, and then Boston Housing Authority would pay the remainder. There's also project-specific places, certain buildings that are also available for search if you have a voucher, where you can rent there specifically. Again, this is for renters only, so developers may also build buildings that kind of use this program, but it's not for home ownership. So that brings us to this statistic. Fancy words like area median income, AMI, and I wanted to talk a bit about how that differs from neighborhood median income. So if you go to the city of Boston, you can look up the kind of official HUD or BPDA numbers for the area median incomes in the city. And what you might notice when you go there is that some of these numbers may or may not reflect your reality. Rather than looking at Boston incomes across the entire city, we think that it's sometimes more relatable to look at neighborhood median income. So if you look at, for example, 100% area median income, so this isn't down in the bottom right-hand corner here, we've got $79,000 for an individual or a household family of 4 making $113,000. So according to area median income in Boston, which the kind of catchment for that is like all the way from like New Hampshire people who commute to Boston to Dorchester, like Brookline, Newton, everything, this whole conglomerate of people. If you looked at the people who make the least amount of money and the people who make the most amount of money, everyone in the middle, like dead in the middle, that would be 100%. So if you're looking at this and thinking, hey, that may or may not reflect me and my life at either a one person or a household family of four, it's probably because the catchment is really large. So if we start to look at more neighborhood median income, oh, Shalina is also saying that the voucher can lead to home ownership. Thank you for that tip, Shalina. I did not know that. We'll talk about what does that really mean for somebody who's living in Dorchester. Okay, so we saw the Boston median incomes. But when we talk about Dorchester, the median household income is more like $54,000 or $55,000 a year, or $4,500 a month. So the majority of the households in Boston are families. There's about 50,000 households in Boston and in Dorchester, and about 150,000 people living in Dorchester. And the majority of these places are renters. So most folks are renting in Dorchester. So you can see that there's a big discrepancy. So if we did neighborhood median incomes for Dorchester, 55,000. If we're looking at area median incomes for the whole swath of Boston, that's looking at more like 80 to 100 and something $1,000. So more on that later in the videos, but just wanted to introduce that topic. Lastly, common ways that income restricted or quote unquote affordable housing is paid for can be in the form of all of these things. So a project still costs money in the end of the day. It's unfortunately, there's no silver bullet or kind of miracle that makes buildings just miraculously cost less money. But there are some ways that we can help the rents or the homeownership sale prices for units cost less by using these different funds. So those could come in the form of grants and donations, which could come as cash, offset the costs of a project. It could come in the form of tax credits, like we discussed. The federal government distributes tax credits to each state, which then distributes it to different projects in each city. And certain amounts of tax credits are allocated to projects every year. There's a limited amount. It could be from public funds like low interest loans. Like the city might give you a really great low interest loan that's better than the 5% loan that you would get for a commercial loan on a bank. It could be land at a discounted price. For example, if the city is doing a request for proposals process and Jackie got into that RFP and the community was totally behind her with these 8 units in her community cafe, she might go to the city and say, in order to make these units affordable for Dorchester residents, I need some help here. Could you sell me the land for $1? And that could be part of her request for proposal that she says, in order to make this work, I need you, the city, to sell me the land for $1. Not everybody's buying land in Boston for $1, but it can happen. And so in return, all of these things would promise a certain amount of time, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 99 years, whatever rules go along with the money. There's always rules that go along with this type of money of how long we would reserve these units for affordable housing. And then of course there's government assistance programs, which also come from taxes, which might be like down payment assistance programs or voucher programs. And all of those are ways that we can get income restricted housing or housing that is less expensive than market rate available to folks in the city. So none of those are all the answer, but I did want to talk about some alternative answers as we are rounding the corner here. Thanks for sticking with me. I know it's late, folks. So alternative community ownership models. Disclaimer, this part of the presentation is not investment advice or legal advice. We are simply going to introduce some of the concepts like community land trusts, cooperatives, and we're going to focus a little more on crowd-funded real estate. And then we will give some examples of real local investment opportunities that are less than $2,000 that you can participate in now in Dorchester. All of this is going to have some great follow-up video coming from Co-Everything the week of May 22nd. So community land trust, can I get a raise of hands if anybody knows of a community land trust in Boston, or could you like type the name of the community land trust that you know of in Boston into the chat? Let's see let's take the temperature on folks and community land trusts. I know at least Mia is in the audience and knows of at least one community land trust. DSNI, thanks Dariella. Jackie's raised her hand. Jackie knows of one. Type it in the chat, Jackie. Everybody's got DSNI. Maryland's got DSNI. I'm on the board of Boston Farms Community Land Trust. Anybody else? Boston Community Land Trust and Dariella. Great. DSNI is actually one of the oldest community land trusts in the country. So community land trusts started in the 60s, 70s in Georgia as a way for Black farmers to protect their land and also hold it into perpetual affordability. The first one was called New Communities, Inc. It's a really beautiful model that has been now expanded across the country for many years and can be a tool for creating permanent affordability. The way that it's formed is it is a nonprofit business. Oftentimes there is dual ownership, which means there could be ownership of houses separate from ownership of land. So you can see in this little drawing, the dark green is representing the land, which may be under the land trust. And the buildings themselves may also be under some other type of ownership. It could be individuals or maybe a housing cooperative that's owning each of the homes. The land is then leased to these buildings. So the community land trust will say, hey, for your land that is underneath your house, will you pay us? And depending on the community land trust on when or how they got the money and what they need to pay for to maintain the land over the year, a low cost, let's say, can you pay us $100 a month to rent this area where your house that you own on top of is? So it removes the cost of land from homeowners. We're often looking at perpetual affordability and perpetual responsibility of this land. Oftentimes there is a community base and they are trying to expand and acquire more land to hold it for permanent affordability. It's governed by the board of directors as a nonprofit, and that's usually about a third of them are community residents. A third of them will also be other community members who don't necessarily live in the land trust. And then a third might be other working professionals who have experience in real estate or property management, etc. So that is how a community land trust works. And then the next topic we wanted to introduce was cooperatives. So real estate cooperatives are maybe not the number one type of cooperative when people think of the word cooperative. You may think of a food co-op, you might think of a worker-owned co-op, you might think of a consumer co-op or a purchasing co-op, but these do exist. And so we wanted to introduce these three different types. There might be a housing cooperative, which would be made up of residents. In all cooperative models, the primary governing body is elected by the members. So as a resident, I will own a share in this for-profit company. I guess co-ops can also be nonprofit, but typically they're a for-profit company. And then through democratic decision-making, where each member, each shareholder has one vote, you have a democratic structure embedded in the legal existence of this company. So you will be entitled to, in a housing co-op, let's say I own a share for this amount of money, and that entitles me to sleep and live in apartment number 2, which is a 2-bedroom, 1 bath on the 3rd floor of our housing co-op. So it's made up of residents. In the instance of a land co-op or a permanent real estate co-op or a real estate cooperative, it could be made up of residents, community members, and impact investors. And often there, you may be doing what a community land trust does, but you're holding it in a cooperative where people still own shares of the land, as opposed to it being a nonprofit may be dependent on a lot of grants and donations, and the land co-op can actually be cash put in by shareholders who are democratically controlling, governing, and holding the land into perpetuity. There's also a solar co-op, which means you can each cooperatively own shares of solar panels or solar arrays that may or may not exist on your house. They could exist somewhere else. And in return, you might get some return on your investment, or you might get energy credits in the form of less expensive energy. And that brings us to our final example that we're really excited to share about, which is real estate crowdfunding. Can I get a thumbs up if this is the first time you've heard of real estate crowdfunding. Do a couple thumbs up, couple people. Okay. All right, thank you. So real estate crowdfunding is different than a Kickstarter. It's different than donations. This is Regulation CF. Denisha says it's awesome, where community members can invest and own shares of a development project alongside the real estate development team. Crowdfunding always happens on a platform. It's very regulated. It didn't exist before a couple of years ago. Since 2016 in the Jobs Act, they've now allowed regular people to collectively, as a group, own part of real estate building or crowdfund businesses and other entities. Before that was not allowed. Crowdfunding projects, what they often do is they sign up for a platform, they have a prospectus and a whole pro forma, and the whole thing is outlined, and they'll set a goal and they'll say, at minimum, we want to raise, I don't know, $50,000 to help buy equity in this building. And in order for them to get that $50,000 from the platform, you have to actually raise or exceed that amount of money. So you'll set a minimum and a maximum. The maximum per business, I believe, is $5 million in crowdfunding per year. So I guess if you want to be real big and bold, you can go out and crowdfund at $5 million. You'll have to set a floor and you have to exceed it, and you can't go above 5 million. So this is like neighbors, everybody on this call, we could all individually own and buy a share at risk of a piece of a building together. So that's what this little colorful pie means with the building in the middle. Instead of us each trying to own or buy like one apartment or condo unit or in one little square inside of that building, we would all own a slice and then own the building together. We may or may not even live there. So the next question, who can invest in Reg CF or crowdfunding for real estate? And I think it's kind of funny because Reg CF means Regulation CF, but I like to think of it as regular people can invest in crowdfunding. So anyone in the US can invest. It's not place or state specific. Non-accredited investors, that's just people like you and me, anyone aged 18 and up who makes less than $200,000 annually or $300,000 including your spouse or partner, with a total net worth of less than $1 million, excluding your primary residence. So I think that's most people. Other people who make more than that and are worth more than that are called accredited investors. And they get all kinds of regulations where they can invest in almost whatever the hell they want. But for us regular people, this is an opportunity that regular people can invest in crowdfunding real estate. The limits are around $2,200 across all crowdfunding per year per person. So the clarification there is it's $2,200 or 5% of either your income or net worth, whichever is the higher amount. So for example, if you're a person in Dorchester, a single household with a median income of $55,000, you could invest no more than $2,750 per year on crowdfunding. Okay, so that's just to give you an example. It's like, I say it's around $2,000. And for some people, this may be pretty exciting because it could be the entry into owning real estate development that's a lot more accessible than saving up for the down payment and like trying to get your affordable home through a lottery system. Marty asks, what counts as your net worth for the purpose? There's actually a pretty involved calculator, Marty, on the SEC regulation website, but we can follow up with that maybe in the Q&A on May 29th. Thanks for the question though. All right. Why would anybody want to do this? It allows you to have local investment. It allows you to have community ownership across a broader spectrum so that it's not just big investors who are the ones that are making profit off of real estate development. And in a sense, depending on the way that you structure it, can also allow for some community control over decisions and entry into real estate ownership. Moving on, I did just want to show a couple of other ways that you could invest now in Dorchester, if you haven't heard of these already. And there's some folks who are neighbors and organizers on this call that may already know about all of these projects. But I did just want to share about the Dorchester Food Co-op. So the Dorchester Food Co-op is a grocery store that is worker owned and is also a consumer co-op that is coming to 195 Bowdoin Street. They currently have a direct public offering available at dorchesterfoodcoop.com/invest, where you can invest $2,000 into becoming an owner and having an ownership share in that grocery store. You can also join as a member of the food co-op for $100 per household. And what that means there is it's again one member, one vote. So as a cooperative, you will become an owner of that business. And as an investor, you will have a return on investment depending on the success of that grocery store that's coming soon. So that's one opportunity if you haven't heard about it. Dorchester Food Co-op, and I'm a part of it. I'm the designer, and me as the community organizer. There's a lot of folks who are all members. I've seen you at various community planning sessions. Have been organizing for almost a decade to bring this store to life. So we're really excited about that investment opportunity. There is also Boston Ujima Project, if you haven't heard about it. Boston Ujima Project has a variety of different ways that you can invest in a community controlled and democratically controlled fund. And it can be anywhere from like $50 to $10,000. And as an investor, you may or may not qualify to also become a voting member. Voting allows you to make decisions on what the fund is going to invest their money in and loan money to. So for example, the most recent was, I believe, $100,000 investment into Cerro Cooperative, which does commercial composting around the city and is also a worker-owned co-op. And in order to become a voting member, to participate in distributing the funds, you need to be a person of color living in Boston, or a person of color displaced from living in Boston, or a working class person. So anybody in the state of Massachusetts can invest in Ujima. And lastly, I wanted to share Co-op Power. So Co-op Power Boston Metro East is a solar cooperative, and they are starting up a whole bunch of new projects where they're going to put solar on many different rooftops on buildings in Boston. And Co-op Power, again, is like a one member, one vote ownership share structure. And it comes with a variety of benefits, which could include discounted electricity or access to solar analysis if you are a homeowner. And I think their memberships range anywhere from $250 to $975, depending on what types of access you want as a member. That's also a democratically controlled co-op. So all of those will be available. I can send those along in the chat, or if anybody has questions about them, feel free to ask. And then last but not least, I did want to introduce 3 different crowdfunding platforms: smallchange.co, raisegreen.com, and mainvest.com. So Small Change is a real estate crowdfunding platform. So for example, if we had a project that we wanted to raise money for, we would log into Small Change and we would set up a raise. We would go through a bunch of interviews and paperwork. Or if you're a community member and you wanted to invest in a local project, if there were local projects available for you to invest in, you would log into this website, read this prospectus, sign a whole lot of paperwork, make your decision, and you could contribute your up to, like I said, about $2,200 per year in investing in real buildings and real properties that would give you returns. So Small Change is about crowdfunded real estate. Raise Green is about solar and energy related infrastructure. So this is cooperative ownership and, this is crowdfunded ownership over solar arrays, deep energy retrofits, and energy improvements for buildings. And so similar to the last one I showed, you could, let's say you have a solar co-op that you want to start in Fields Corner, and you're going to say, I want all of my neighbors to own this solar array with me. I'm going to put together a deal. And if you've got a developer lined up, you could log into this website and go through a similar process as I explained with buildings, but this one is for energy related infrastructure. And then you could do a campaign and have your neighbors crowdfund and own that solar array with you. So another example of crowdfunding. And then the last example I wanted to show is Mainvest. And Mainvest is crowdfunding for brick and mortar businesses. So for example, Comfort Kitchen did a raise that closed in February where they raised $100,000 in crowdfunding capital. So similarly here, if you're a business, and Comfort Kitchen is also in Dorchester, opening soon. Bipla, I don't know if you're on the call, but Bipla is one of the owners. And so you can come in here and find out, and you can sort it by map to find out if there are businesses that you would want to invest in, that you want to become a crowdfunded owner and own a share in that business. So all of these things are of course at risk, and each of them have their own paybacks and their own returns on investment that will be listed, but we just wanted to share those with you. All right, so more information on all of these types of things coming soon in the follow-ups. We did want to remind you and encourage you to send us any questions about anything via email at any time, and we're going to collect them up and then do hopefully a really deeper dive on the May 29th Q&A. So save the date in your calendar for 2 p.m., May 29th. So here we are at the end of our show. Step one, if you liked this workshop, invite a friend to the kickoff on Saturday, May 22nd at 2 p.m. You can also sign up for email and text follow-up. In fact, if your friend is not into going to Zooms, I could send this recording and they could still sign up and then decide to receive all the follow-up content in the week of May 22nd to May 29th. So that leads us to step 3, where you guys will diligently open your emails and watch amazing videos from Jackie, Denisha, Travis, myself, Declan, Marilyn, and be totally inspired and not overwhelmed by jargon to learn more and take a deeper dive into all of the topics we covered today. And you can look at those videos at any time you want, but we'll be sending out one or two per day throughout the week of May 22nd to the 29th. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, please send them in, and then we'll do a live Q&A closeout on May 29th at 2 p.m. And then we will open up the Zoom room so everybody can get to know each other, and maybe we'll build this kind of wonderful cohort of folks who are interested in real estate and community ownership. And that is all I have for you tonight. And so I'm gonna just put us in a little gallery mode. Oh, Janet says, please send the videos so you can share. Wonderful. Yes, so thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed. And of course, if we wanted to open it up for questions, go ahead and start putting them in the chat. And I'm going to save this entire chat, collect those questions up, and then leave it open for discussion on May 29th. But that's all we have for you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I'm not so good at the mute controls. Otherwise, I think this is the part where everyone would unmute and say goodbye. Thank you, especially to Travis Lee, Teely Development. Thank you also to all of our community advisors. And thank you, of course, to Erie Ellington and Brinsley Neighborhood Partnership. Hi, Mari. So glad you could all make it. We're really excited. Thank you, folks.